If somebody told me my 20s were going to be the best years of my life, I'd probably have an existential crisis wondering where I went wrong. But actually though, I feel like I'm going through a quarter life crisis right now, and I want to share it with all of you. And I know that means being vulnerable on the internet, which is really scary, but I'm hoping that future me, future Timmy, will look back on this one day and be proud of all the problems that he hopefully overcame. So yeah, here's the good, the bad, and the ugly from these past 2 months. The first domino to fall was my relationship. From the beginning, we just clicked, right? We had the same types of hobbies. We were both Christian, which meant that we both understood each other on a spiritual level. We both shared the same dumb sense of humor. And, we both felt safe when we were together. But as time progressed, the cracks began to show. I realized that we were just fundamentally different in many ways, just based off the way that we were raised. Like, I was raised in a pretty stable, loving family, and on her end, it wasn't exactly the same. There were definitely a lot more, traumas to be uncovered there, which obviously I'm not going to go into details because that's not my story to share. But yeah, it ended up manifesting in the relationship. And to make things worse, we actually moved in together a few months into the relationship, which only intensified a lot of the issues that we faced. When things were bad, they were really bad. Like, I felt like my world was crashing down. And that's probably because she was my world, right? Like, I literally thought about her every day. Around the 1 year mark, we had had so many arguments and so many near breakup experiences that even when we were moving in together, we almost broke up. So it didn't come to a surprise to me when we actually finally did break up for real 2 months ago. And a large part of that is because of something that's been happening throughout the relationship. And it's this feeling of being underappreciated. I felt like I was always getting told that I wasn't doing enough, even though I was actually trying my hardest. I was trying my best. The last argument we had was actually about that, and it was just the straw that broke the camel's back. It wasn't anything new, but that's kind of what ended it, for me at least. But the thing that really took a toll on me was actually the aftermath of the breakup. First, we shared an apartment together, so that means we also shared a lease together. And that lease was set to renew. At a certain point, she actually blocked me from all communication. And this was really stressful because this was supposed to be a joint decision-making effort. And I couldn't contact her number, her Facebook, her email. I wasn't able to discuss important things with her, like the security deposit split or who would be taking over the lease. It was just like, I was just completely in the dark. Thankfully, I was able to get most of the information I needed from the property manager. But yeah, the whole situation was just really stressful, and yeah, it was bad. The second domino to fall was my job. Around the same time that we broke up 2 months ago, I shit you not, my company announced layoffs. Now, I'm a software engineer and the company is based in San Francisco, and it was a hybrid position, so I would commute 2 times a week from my apartment that my ex and I shared in Oakland. Now, when we broke up, I thought that I'd be the one staying on the lease since I was paying for pretty much of the rent for the apartment for both of us. But as time progressed, I realized I'm probably going to get laid off. And if I'm out of a job and I still have rent to pay, that would be a really shitty situation. And there's a few factors that led me to believe that I'm probably going to get laid off. So the first thing that I found out was they weren't actually reducing the number of jobs. They were just relocating them to lower cost of living areas. Essentially what that meant was, since I was in San Francisco, they were probably going to move my job to Turkey. Second, I found out that the cuts were going to be pretty massive, around 30%. And so that meant that in my area, San Francisco, which is the impacted area, it was probably going to be even higher. Third, I was relatively early in my career and I was a new hire. I'd only been working there for 5 to 6 months. So the company probably wouldn't lose a lot of money if they replaced me. So I decided to move out of the apartment and live back at home in Sacramento. I figured that if I didn't get laid off, I could just find a new apartment anyways. And that way I wouldn't have to stay in that apartment in Oakland with all the things that I'd been through and all of the memories and yeah. So I had to commute back and forth between Sacramento and San Francisco twice a week for work. And during that time, I was also stopping by in Oakland and I was, dealing with all of the apartment stuff, trying to sell my furniture. I even got sick at one point and, it was just horrible. I was just trying to get out of there and it was the worst thing to probably happen to me in as long as I can remember. I was in like the worst mental state. Well, a few days after that, and about a month ago from today, I finally got the news that I was laid off. And honestly, a part of me was a little bit relieved because we had all been waiting in anticipation for this for, about a month now. But obviously another part of me was absolutely devastated. The day they laid me off, there were actually two people in the call. There was an HR person, HR rep, and some engineering director that I've never met, I've never worked with. And they basically just told me like, congrats, sorry, not congrats. They basically just told me, thank you for your service. Thank you for your work here. You're a great engineer. But yeah, we're shutting down your Slack and your computer by end of day. So make sure you have everything wiped and gone from your work computer by end of day. And yeah, all right, take care. Good luck in your future endeavors. Bye. And I just remember leaving the call feeling so icky. Like if there was one word to describe it, it was just icky. Like I felt like I was being dismissed like a child and I was just being told like, okay, yeah, you're basically trash. Like you're worthless here. And so yeah, that was fun. To make things worse, my entire team actually got laid off, but they got to stick on until December. They were part of like this transitionary layoff group or whatever. But for me, I was laid off immediately. I think there's two reasons for this. The first is because I had actually notified my manager many, many months prior that I was planning a trip to visit family in Indonesia around this time. And so they probably figured out like when they were doing layoffs, oh, this guy's not going to be here. He's not going to be working for like 2-3 weeks. So, if we let him go early, it would probably be better. The second reason is because I was the newest hire. And on top of that, I was the most junior person on my team. So they probably thought, they're probably still going to finish the project by the deadline, which is the end of the year without him. So what did I do after all of this? Well, I felt extremely lonely. My girlfriend and the few friends I had from work were now gone. I just tried to spend as much time as I could with my family and jumped at pretty much any opportunity to hang out with my friends. Continued to reflect a lot, continued to process my emotions, continued to go to therapy, and continue to pray to God and ask Him for direction for what He wanted me to do with my life. I even bought a new camera and at one point seriously contemplated just quitting everything and just starting my YouTube career. Mommy, Papi, if you're watching, don't worry, this idea didn't even make it past the day. But that loneliness kept creeping in and it manifested itself in things that I'm not especially proud of. I got really lazy. I started watching a lot of porn. It was just bad. And in terms of my career, I did do a few practice problems, like a few leak code problems, but ultimately I was pretty unmotivated to, get back on that. I've always enjoyed being a programmer, but I honestly started contemplating whether or not this was the right career path for me, if this was a career path I wanted to continue on. Getting laid off just made me feel disillusioned by the whole tech industry. I mean, it's one thing to hear about it on the news, but it's a whole different experience to get the short end of the stick. But, despite everything, I'm still grateful for everything that I do have, my friends, my family, and a place to stay. I don't even have to worry about rent or food. And so, while my world is crashing around me, at least I have that. And remember that trip to Indonesia that I mentioned earlier? Well, I just got back from that trip and it was a breath of fresh air. I did vlog it and I want to start editing the vlog eventually, but honestly, just being back at home, all of those feelings of loneliness and being lost just came rushing back. I actually have 2 interviews this week from recruiters that reached out to me while I was on vacation, but I just feel so unmotivated and unprepared for them. I don't know, I just have this sinking, depressing feeling that I will make the wrong decision about what I want to do with my life, like where I want to work, what I want to do, where I want to live, and just end up being a sad hermit with no close friends, no church community, and just no direction in life. I know this is probably irrational and just not a good mentality to have, but it's honestly how I feel right now. I'm sorry, I know the story doesn't have a really clear ending, but it was more to show, where I'm at right now. And I did want to end on a more positive, more hopeful note. There's a quote from Jeremiah in the Bible that I refer to when I do feel down and lost. And it goes like this: "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope." This quote reminds me of the biblical story of Daniel. Daniel, despite being in exile for over 70 years and facing pressures to conform to Babylonian society and give up his faith, never gave up his faith, and he stayed faithful to God. So because of his faithfulness, God actually blessed Daniel with the amazing wisdom and ability to interpret dreams. I know, it's really sick. And when the king at the time, the Babylonian king at the time, King Nebuchadnezzar, had a dream, only Daniel could interpret it correctly. And so he was pretty much appointed to be the king's right-hand man. Well, Daniel continued to serve multiple kings after King Nebuchadnezzar, including King Darius. And when King Darius saw how wise Daniel was, he considered appointing him over the whole kingdom. When the other ministers and rulers found out about this, they grew extremely envious and decided to plot against him. They convinced King Darius to condemn to death anyone who didn't worship anyone but himself, which proved to be a little bit of a problem for Daniel because he only worshiped God, right? So he was basically condemned to death, and they did it in the most cruel way. They basically just threw him into a den of lions. And if you're like any normal person getting thrown into a den of lions, you're going to become minced meat. But because Daniel was faithful, God sent an angel to seal the mouths of the lions. And because of that, Daniel was unharmed. And you remember those people that, plotted against him? Well, King Darius was pretty pissed off. And the king commanded, and those men who had maliciously accused Daniel were brought and cast into the den of lions, they, their children, and their wives. And before they reached the bottom of the den, the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces. So, what's the point of the story? Well, I think the point of the story is faithfulness. Daniel was faithful to God, and more importantly, God was faithful to Daniel. Even when he was in exile for 70 years, he was faithful. Even when he was in a position of power, second to none other than the king, he was faithful. Even when all those ministers and rulers couldn't find any corruption in Daniel and literally had to make up a new law to get him thrown into a lion's den, he was faithful. Even when Daniel found out, dude literally didn't even skip a beat. He just continued praying 3 times a day, and guess what? God answered those prayers. So how does this apply to my life? In the same way that God knew Daniel, God also knows me. And so he knows my struggles. He knows what I need. And as long as I continue to be faithful to him and trust in him and do things for his glory, then I should have nothing to worry about. But it's just hard to remind myself of that when I am going through it. And so I just pray that I can continue to put my trust in God and just put my future in his hands. So yeah, for anyone watching, thank you. I appreciate you. If you could pray for me, that would mean a lot. And if you have any prayer requests, feel free to put them in the comments below. You don't have to be Christian. I would love to pray for you as well. But yeah, thank you so much. I love you guys. God bless.